Some girls grow up playing with dolls. Some grow up to be a bit tomboyish, but growing up in a boxing family and then to carry it on to your own family, that takes a very special kind of lady, just like our first inductee. She was born August 29th, 1950 in Youngstown, Ohio. It wasn't long before her father, who ran his own boxing gym, began to pass along to her all of his knowledge of the fight business. And she was quite the student. From an early age, she was taught how to keep the gym clean and take care of the equipment. It was in the days of that boxing gym that she met her future husband, Frank, who at the time they met was one of her father's boxers. They eventually got married, and she grew into the role of wife and later a mother of 3 sons who all competed as boxers themselves. Her own career desires continued to lean in the boxing business. It was in Ohio that her career began to blossom. She learned many of her skills working for USA Boxing as a judge, a timekeeper, a computer tech, taking charge of running weigh-ins, and even, when it was needed, to help set up the ring. Family eventually moved to Palm Bay, Florida. She went to work with another arm of the USA Boxing organization. Word of this take charge lady began to spread, and ultimately she was recruited by what was then the Florida State Boxing Commission. She started working as a timekeeper, but commission officials learned about her previous experience in Ohio, and then she made her debut as a show coordinator. Dedicated and hardworking, but also has a very endearing personality that led to admiration and respect from the boxers and all the other folks in the boxing community. She retired and has been dealing with her own health issues over the last few years. And even though she doesn't get out too much to see live shows, it has not tempered her love for the sport. We are all very thrilled and very happy that she was able to be here to join her husband, Frank, who is already a Hall of Fame member himself. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming to the Florida Boxing Hall of Fame Class of 2024, Boxing Coordinator Kathy Gentile. Yeah.
Lift me up, hold me down, keep me close, safe and sound. Burning in a hopeless dream, hold me when you go to sleep. Keep me in the warmth of your love when you depart.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm blessed to be here today. Bob just did my whole speech, so he saved me a lot of time. Anyway, I definitely want to thank the selection committee for recognizing me for this award, and many thanks to the Hall of Fame board and staff. I want to congratulate all of my fellow inductees and all the past inductees that are here today. Appreciation for my boxing knowledge go out to my dad in heaven, Joey Bishop, husband Frank Gentile, and my sons Frankie, Paul, and Joey. My dad and spouse were both boxers, coaches, officials, and commissioners. My sons Frankie, Paul, and Joey were all participants. I worked in boxing as an official and in the commission, and this is a little bit of my history for those of you that don't know me. As Bob said, my dad was a boxer. When he retired, he became a coach, had a gym in our basement in Youngstown, Ohio. We weren't allowed to go down there when they were training, But my sister and I would always sneak in the dining room and look through the register to watch the guys train. We always were trying to figure out what that noise that they were making with their nose or with their mouth. We couldn't figure that out. When the boxing training was over, we would go down to the basement and we would help my dad clean up. And either once or twice a week, he would put the gloves on us and train us. He would teach us to throw punches, spar, hit the speed bag, and hit the big bag. That first heard this saying from my father's mouth, my ears, is put your hands up and your chin down. My husband Frank was, I didn't know him then. Frank was training in my dad's gym, and he also attended my school. In 1964, we had a school dance, and I went with all my girlfriends. Of course, girls were on one side, boys were on the other. And Frank walks across, and he taps me on the shoulder, puts his hand out, and he says, "Can I have this dance?" I turned all red and embarrassed. My girlfriends were going, ooh, and I accepted. And I danced with Frank, and we've been dancing ever since 1964. A few years later, my dad retired as a coach, and my husband Frank took over, he wasn't my husband, my boyfriend took over the gym. When we were married, I started traveling with him, and he and I traveled almost every weekend around the Lake Erie Association to amateur boxing, and I helped wherever I could with the boxers. In the 1970s, in our region, I don't know about any other state, but USA Boxing took over the amateur program. And with USA Boxing came the pass books. And it was a nightmare at the beginning, like anything else is. If you went to a competition and you didn't have a pass book, you didn't fight. And you have to remember, in those days, there were no computers, no cell phones, so you couldn't show it on your phone. And it ruined a lot of shows that had to be canceled because people would come without the pass books. My job immediately for our gym came to get the pass books, make sure everyone obtained their pass books before we went to the show. Later in the 70s, I became certified with USA Boxing as a clerk, timekeeper, and judge. My first assignment with USA Boxing, I was sent to Lake Placid, New York in 1985. Remember, all my dates are on or about. I don't have exacts, but on or about. In 1985, I went to work the under-19 tournament as a timekeeper and a clerk. In the room next door to mine was a young fighter, just turned 16 years old, unknown. His name was Mike Tyson. Most mornings, he would be on the elevator, hold it for me. If I had a box of pass books or the bell or whatever, he would always grab my bag and carry it. In the lunchroom, I observed he talked a lot to the kids, made them laugh, very friendly. He did go on to win the tournament, became the most outstanding boxer, and we all know where he went from there. In the early 90s, AIBA approved computer scoring for the USA Boxing and the Olympics. I was invited to go out to Colorado and train to be a computer tech, which I did. After becoming a computer tech, I worked USA versus Russia, Poland, Canada, Puerto Rico, and England. I worked at the 92 Olympics in Worcester, Massachusetts at the box off as a clerk and a timekeeper. I worked the 96 Olympic event in Pennsylvania as a computer tech, and I worked a 2000 Olympic event in Tampa as a computer tech. In 1996, I moved to Florida, and I was here one day, unpacked my bags, repacked with my USA Boxing clothes, and the next day we were off to the Sunshine State Games in Gainesville, Florida. When I got there, I met a whole new family of officials, coaches, doctors, and many fighters and boxers that I followed from the JOs to the novice, to the open, and to the pros. Some of those are here today. Well, my sons Frankie and Joey both participated. Nate Campbell, Edna Cherry, Andre Berto, the Willis brothers, Keith Thurman, Jeff Lacey, Sammy Valentine, Danny Lozano. Those were some of the ones that I remembered and followed through their professional careers. in the year. Also at that tournament, I met Bob and Debbie Nicholson, became very good friends. And every weekend, Frank, myself, Bob, and Debbie went and worked amateur events, and we did the weigh-ins and the event. In 2000, I received a phone call from Chris Mefford. He was the Florida boxing commissioner at the time. He was looking for a timekeeper in my area. Someone had given him my name, asked me to come to Kissimmee that Friday, which I did. I was hired as a timekeeper. In 2004, I was in Sarasota at an event. Talked to Chris again. He was telling me boxing professional was picking up in Florida. Would I be interested in being a coordinator? Could I come to Ocala that week, which I did. When I was hired as boxing coordinator, I worked under Chris Mefford, Jason Penley, Max Parker, Tom Malloy, Cynthia Hevern, and Paul Waters. In 2018, I had an illness. That's why my voice is like this. I had surgery in my throat, had a tumor, had a lot of issues after that, had to have treatments, lost of hair. I didn't go out of the house for a very long time. But boxing wasn't over. I received a phone call from the regulation, DBPR, Department of Regulation in Florida, and he said, I know you're ill, you can't travel, but I have a proposition for you. Would you like to work out of your home? We'll set up an office. He said the amateur boxing associations, these amateurs were starting these ASOs with boxing and MMA. They were getting a lot of complaints that they weren't following regulation. And he asked me if I would follow up on the complaints, call the complainant, get the information, send it to him so he could send regulators to the shows to make sure the Florida statutes were followed. Additionally, there was a lot of complaints of tough man contests and unsanctioned boxing events in the state of Florida. So he asked me to follow up on those complaints, make sure I would give him the date, location, and he would send a regulator along with local police enforcement to break these things up. They found boxing in backyards, bars, strip clubs, nightclubs. They broke up many, and there were many arrests made also at the time. That was in 2018. 2019, 2020, COVID came, things quieted down. The regulator that I worked for left the state, but I did receive a call from his boss, asked me if I would be willing to stay on, work from my house, but instead of doing boxing, I would be doing unlicensed contractors and electricians, which I said, yeah, of course, I'll go ahead and do that. But boxing still wasn't over in my life because my grandson had just turned 16 years old. And well, let me back up a minute. During COVID, Frank put a gym in his shed, and my sons would train. He'd train my grandson, my granddaughter. Some of the fighters come over and train. Some grandson comes over. He says, Grandma and Papa, I've been thinking, you know, Papa, you fought, my dad fought, my uncles fought, my great-grandfather that I don't know fought. I want to box. Will you guys support me? And then that happened. Of course, we supported him. Just recently, Frank and I both received calls from our city of Palm Bay, and they want to do amateur and maybe a pro event in boxing, asked if I would help to coordinate the events, and Frank and I both. So that's going on right now. So just let me tell you, if you think boxing is ever over in your life, it's not, because the phone will ring, the email will come, and you're always in it. Something always comes up or brings you back to boxing. Over the years, I've watched a lot of boxing, seen my sons fight, seen kids from my husband's gym, and boxing is a challenge. But it does build discipline, dedication, and the skills that these young men learn. They're life skills, not just boxing skills. And for me, to see one person come into a gym from the street and turn their life around, you know, or that depressed kid turn their life around, to me, to see that person be saved and go on with a good life is worth all my volunteer hours. It really is. So from my mouth to you, something I've always said to my kids and my grandkids is always do the right thing, especially when no one is looking. It's called integrity. So ladies and gentlemen, protect yourselves at all times. Thank you, and God bless you all.